Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. This is your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 bestselling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, sign up for my newsletter to get more information about natural healing and lots of free stuff. Now, our guest today is Pat Gibson. Pat is a chiropractor and an Amazon #1 bestselling author. She's the founder and director of the Gibson Chiropractic Clinic located outside of Atlanta and holds workshops about happiness. Welcome, Dr. Pat Gibson.
Thank you, Carrigan. Appreciate it.
So, Pat, in your book, Living in Your Sweet Spot, you talk about what it means to live our authentic self. What do you think it means to live our authentic self?
Well, in the book, what I wanted to do is kind of systematically go through body, mind, and spirit and look at all the ways that we keep ourselves from being our best self. And so for me, authenticity is really being that, your best self, bringing all of yourself to the table.
Okay, that's a really, really good definition of it. And, you know, one of the things that I talk about my clients, sometimes we get overwhelmed by the idea of competition. There's lots of people who do all kinds of things. And I always say, you know, there really is no competition. All you have to do is be your best self, right?
That is absolutely true. You know, reminds me of a client I had who's a young artist, and I was working with her doing some emotional work, and she was so worried about how her work was going to be received. And I said, you know what? Here's the deal. Nobody can do what you're going to do but you. And that's really what authenticity is really bringing yourself that nobody else can be but you.
Yeah, exactly. You're your sweet spot. You're the only person who can be you. You can give your unique vibration. Now, your book is titled Living in Your Sweet Spot. What does it mean to live in your sweet spot?
I think it's like when all of those pieces come together, you have the most amazing sense of peace within yourself. You are living large, if you will, and I mean that in whatever sense it is, whether you're a mom or a public speaker or whatever it is that is you, that you have designed for yourself, that's living in your sweet spot. And in fact, when I got the title, this kind of is how it feels to live in your sweet spot. You know, I take off Wednesday afternoons to write and do my stuff for my comprehensive wellness for life and so on. And so when I take that time, I'm really specific about actually using it, because I feel like if I'm taking the time and I'm not making any money, I've got to use it. But one day I had this internal debate about, okay, let's take a bike ride and you can think about things while you're bike riding. And I was on the Atlanta Beltline, and it was about 75 and sunny and beautiful, and the clouds were beautiful and the city was beautiful. And I was like, man, this is like living in your sweet spot. And that's exactly how the title came about, because that's what it feels like. It's like delicious.
Yeah, I love that description of just being delicious. Now, you give workshops on the science of happiness. How many years have you actually done that?
I've been doing that about 6 years, and I used to do it about 6 times a year, and now I do it about 4, just because my schedule is really so busy with public speaking and doing other things and working with private clients that it's just not enough time to do 6, but 4 seems to do the trick.
So what is the science of happiness?
Well, it's a little misleading to call it just the science of happiness, because really, like on the first night, we get together and I do a demonstration of how your thoughts affect people. And it's a physical demonstration, and people love it. So you actually see what happens to someone with negative thoughts and positive thoughts. And we play with that for a couple of hours. And at the end of it, we have wine and cheese, and it's in this beautiful mountain resort. And we have the whole resort to ourselves. So we can sit on the porch and do the rocking chairs, and they bring us wine and cheese, and we usually have a fire going. And the next day, I do in the beginning, we start out with just connecting through a couple of exercises so people can get a sense of why they're there. And it's usually to figure out why they're stuck. But the science part I feel is important because I systematically go through the science, the actual science of how your thoughts create chemicals that affect each one of your cells. And the reason I think that part's important is because when people really understand that something real is going on inside, that there's actually chemistry happening, and that they actually have some control over that, they pay attention on a whole different level. You know, when you take it out of the woo and into the science, people pay attention differently.
Now, you and I are both kinesiologists, so we can see for ourselves and we can show our clients in their bodies how their negative thoughts and their negative beliefs actually affect them, affecting your organs, affecting your brain chemistry, and so on. So the demonstration that you do to demonstrate how your thoughts affect your body, can you describe that for our audience?
I don't want to, because really it's part of the magic to see it actually happen. And if somebody sees this and comes to the workshop, I think it will wreck it. But yes, I do some applied kinesiology to do that. But it's profound. I mean, it's a black and white show of how that really affects somebody. And so I don't want to describe it in detail because I don't want to ruin it.
Okay. Well, I'll just share for our audience a real simple one. So let's say that you worry about someone you care about. This is a pretty profound demonstration. If I worry about somebody that I care about, well, I go weak. Every muscle in my body goes weak, and they do also. So a lot of times we think if I worry about somebody, I'm doing them a favor. No, you're not. If, on the other hand, you see that person as whole, unbroken, being exactly where they need to be on a spiritual level, then I can stay strong and the other person can stay strong also. So it's not even just how our thoughts affect us, but how our thoughts affect everybody around us, literally. So Pat, what do you think it means to be happy?
Wow, that's a great question. I think happiness, first of all, is an inside job. I don't think it comes from anything outside ourselves. And I think that Abe Lincoln had it right when he said happiness is about, you making up your mind to be happy. And you can sit in your bedroom all by yourself and change your thoughts and create happiness within you. So I think it's an energy that we all carry within us and choose to enact whenever we want to.
Now, you, Pat, I know are really good at empowering other people to be balanced. And people like Esther Hicks of Abraham Hicks talk about setting your vibration every day, at the beginning of every day. What practices that do you personally do on a regular basis to keep yourself happy and to keep yourself in a positive frame of mind?
That's a great question, because I do have specific rituals that I do. And in fact, I'm reading Brendan Burchard's book right now about high performance, and he talks about this a lot too. And I preach this a lot because I think it's really important to be intentional about your vibration. And so for me, every morning I get up and I meditate for at least a half hour. I think physical exercise is really important, so I exercise every single day. I think paying attention to your words. Your words are very powerful. And when you really get the sense of how powerful those words are, you become very mindful about what you're saying to someone. Everything matters. How you look, how you present yourself, how you're thinking about the person that's in front of you or the event that you're attending. All of those things send out a vibrational frequency. So it's really also about being very mindful about your person in that space.
Now, we can all from time to time go through challenges in our life, disappointments, deaths, losses, and just change. So when you notice that you have fallen into, we'll call it a negative vibration, whether that's grief or sadness or depression or anxiety, what are some of the top recommendations that you have for our audience to shift out of that place?
Well, first of all, I think emotions are there for a reason. And if we take a look at whatever that gift is, whether it's grief or fear or excitement or anything, whatever it is, there is a reason you're feeling that. So if you can spend a moment and say, okay, why are you here? Why am I feeling this? Why now? And begin to answer those questions for yourself, it's served its purpose and you can begin to let it go. Also, I think changing the energy, for example, if you're really feeling low, for example, I always help my people think about gratitude. And if they're feeling really, really low, then I say start simple. Start with, I have a toilet. I have toilet paper. I have a roof over my house. I don't have a bomb in my backyard. Those are real life conditions that a lot of people have to deal with. So if you're having a bad day, start with gratitude. That is one of the best ways to shift yourself out of it.
I really appreciate that. I do that myself. I know that when I find myself feeling low, before I go to bed every night, I'll make myself write a list of 20 things that I feel grateful for. And if I can get to 20, then I can just keep going, and it really does shift that vibration. So you work with all kinds of people in your practice at Gibson Chiropractic. What do you think keeps people from being happy?
I'd have to say, in my practice, I do a lot of different kinds of things besides just chiropractic. I do the emotional body work and the nutritional stuff. And I think, a common theme that happens for most people is feeling not good enough. And when they feel not good enough, then they go into, I don't deserve because I'm not good enough. And so I think that's the number one thing, is just feeling less than and not good enough.
And that goes back to what we were talking about. When you realize that you only have to be your best self, I don't have to be better or worse than anybody else. You just have to be you, right?
Absolutely. Any given day, you're going to always find somebody that's better than you and worse than you. So all you have to do is pick which way you're looking.
Yeah. And okay, so going back to, you feel the biggest challenges are not good enough, and then because people don't feel good enough, then they feel like they're not deserving.
Exactly.
So what are some of the ways that you help people get over feeling not good enough? And I agree with you. I feel like every human on the planet needs a healing to get over feeling not good enough.
Well, one of the ways that I work specifically with people is on a cellular level, and go back to specific days and times and events and ages where that specific thing started. And then we do a specific procedure where we kind of get rid of it. But it really varies from person to person. There are so many reasons that people make themselves not good enough. It's like not pretty enough, not the right body, not smart enough, wrong family, have somebody in their family who's in jail. The list is endless about why people feel not good enough. Most of the time, what I find when I'm working with people is when they took on this not good enough, it was a completely erroneous situation where they misunderstood what was actually happening. And, when you're young, which is when most of these things happen, you're basically a recorder. You're just taking things in. And if you hear often enough that you are stupid, or you'll never amount to anything, or you're not pretty, or have some pride in yourself, or be like your brother, or whatever it is that you continually hear over and over, as that young child, you really don't have the cognitive ability to discern that that's not true. And yes, you do probably between the ages of 8 to 9, you start to be able to have some consciousness and delineate what's really true and what's not true. But unfortunately, most of the time, you're still in that same family. and you're still getting those same messages. And so it takes a lot to shift out of that, or for you to begin to believe, yeah, no matter what they say, I really am good enough.
Right. And then you were talking about because people feel like they're not good enough, then they don't deserve. So how do you empower people to get over not deserving to be healthy, for example, not deserving to be the best?
Well, first of all, we find out where those belief systems are coming from. And once we discern that, then we kind of work our way out of it. But I also always challenge people to say, well, how much would you have to do to be good enough? Where's the line? Because what I find is that people will work hard to get good enough, and then they get there, but they still don't feel good enough. So they move the line, and the line continues to move and move and move, and they never actually get there. So we look at that initial limiting belief and work our way from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you and I do similar work in that we find the age or ages where the misunderstanding occurred and all the other relevant information. Now, you talked about how we basically get programmed as children. And a lot of these faulty beliefs that are running our lives came from our childhood, as you said, sometimes just a simple misunderstanding, but from the messages that we interpreted from our parents. So, what are some of the common childhood programming beliefs that you see are holding people back, in addition to not good enough and not deserving?
Not being smart enough, never amount to anything, comparison with other people within the family or within the class that they're in, for example. One of the things also is like, oftentimes when a kid is interacting with their parent or with a significant adult, let's just say it that way, and we forget that that adult brings to that moment all of their insecurities too. And so you may have, for example, in my own case, my father never graduated from the 9th grade. So he had, some severe limitations around thinking he was stupid. Now, he was a self-made millionaire. Okay, so let me start there. He was not a dumb man, but his insecurity about having never graduated from the 9th grade and having a precocious kid like me, he would continually tell me I was a pea-brain. And so, and despite the fact that I graduated magna cum laude and all of those things in my early years, I still thought that I was stupid. Despite what evidence to the contrary there was. So those are the kind of things that happen to people. He wasn't really, he knew I was smart, but he brought to the table his own insecurity. And so to make himself feel okay, which is what a lot of people will do, they put down the person who was with them in whatever capacity they're experiencing, whether it's smart or good looking or a good athlete or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of these beliefs that we hold about ourselves come from either our mother or our father or both.
Or teachers or priests or anybody that we hold in high esteem. It's not just our parents. Be surprised at how many things come from also other siblings.
Yeah. So, but as adults, we can sit there and sort of piece through this and ask, does this make sense? Where did this come from? And how can I begin to let it go? So you're so good at empowering your clients to create balance. What do you see as the biggest obstacle or obstacles that people have to creating balance in their life?
Well, is this where we're talking about the not good enough piece?
Again, your book, Living in Your Sweet Spot, and your workshops, you help people create balance.
Oh, okay. I see what you're asking me now. Well, in the book, as I was saying earlier, we kind of do it in a body, mind, spirit way. So for the body, I talk about, how do you take care of yourself? So a lot of people will overeat eat sugar, which totally affects their performance because it's a lot of highs and lows, or they don't feel good in their body because they've got a lot of chemicals that they're putting in their body. People who are sedentary, who don't move, what a lot of people don't realize is movement moves energy. And so if you're not moving, you're basically stuck in your own energy. So that's why it feels good to go out and take a walk or to take a hike or go for a swim or any of those things. You feel good when you get off of it because you've moved that stuck energy in your body. And I don't know if you realize how often your mind gets cleaned out there, whether it's because you've taken the time to just kind of think while you're riding your bike or walking, or whether you're letting things go, or whether you're putting things in a different perspective. Movement moves energy. We've already kind of covered the spirit part in terms of what it is that people, their belief systems. But I think another thing is that people are not really in charge of their minds. You've got to take time to quiet that mind because, like so many of us have millions of things going on at once, whether it's remembering to take your things to the dry cleaner, pick up your kid's contact lens, do an interview like this, write a book, go to work, get a project done. I mean, it's all happening at the same time. And if we don't take that time to just get calm and remember who we are and remember what we're doing, we get off base and we get out of balance. So meditation, I think, is one of the best tools. And I don't care whether you do a coloring book or you sit down in a Zen pose. Find the meditation that works for you. In my workshops, I can't tell you, 90% of people all say, oh, I can't meditate. I've tried that. So I usually will take a meditation ball and I'll hit it and I'll ask them to put their hand down when they can no longer hear it. And, it takes a minute or two. And then when I'm done, I'll say, okay, all of those non-meditators, you just meditated. And they're like, oh, is that all there is to it? Yes, that's all there is to it, is getting control of your mind. So I guess that's pretty much covers it.
Now, so many of our audience are very, very busy people. They have jobs, they have children, they're commuting. There's a lot of responsibility that people have, and they're busy constantly. How can people create balance in the midst of all their busyness and obligations?
That's a great question, and I get asked that all the time. And people will say to me, I'm too busy to do this, I'm too busy to do that. And my response is always the same. You are not busier than me. I am a single mom. I've got a dog. I've got a practice to run. I see private clients. I write books. And I meditate every day and I exercise every day. It's a choice. And the choice is putting you first. And, a lot of times people think that's selfish. But if you put yourself first, you bring your best self to all of those things, whether it's being a mom, being a great person at work, whatever it is that you do. If you are taking care of you first, you will take care of those around you much better.
Now you bring up a great point, Pat, which is that we fill our own well, then we can be better at whatever we do. And yet the truth is that different people, as you know, need different things, whether it's different supplements or different kinds of exercise or different ways to have fun. What are some of the smart ways that you can help people to do to help people identify specifically what will bring balance in their life? How can people figure that out?
I always encourage people to try everything on. So some people don't like to swim, but they like to ride a bike, or they like to walk, or they like to do pickleball. It doesn't matter what it is. Try them all on, see how they feel. And if you like them, continue them. And I also encourage people to do variety. Don't get stuck in one thing and do it over and over again. It's boring. And once you get bored, you'll stop doing it. I mentioned earlier, I didn't care how people meditate. Try on all those different kinds of meditations. In my workshops, I present all the different kinds of meditation, and then I ask them to pick one, especially one they haven't done before, and go out and try it for 15 to 20 minutes. And we actually do that in the workshop. So I think exposure and being willingness to try different things on, whether that's particular diets, how you exercise, how you meditate, timing. Some people don't like to get up early. I say don't. Do it at a different time. But again, it's choice. It's really saying, I want to put these things in my life. I'm going to find a way to do it. The other thing that I've worked with people a lot is I find especially parents say, oh, I can't. I got to do this with the kids. I have a kid who's really active. She's a great tennis player. She's playing tennis 5 days a week. So I've got to fit that in my schedule too. But what I say is get your kids on board. And for example, if you're a mom and you say to the kids, this is mom's hour, don't open the door unless you're bleeding or somebody's dying or something bad's happening. If you take that time seriously, I've actually had one person do a contract with her kids, and because it was that important to her. She wanted to be a writer, and she wasn't leaving any time to do it, and she had all the support in the world to make this work. But she felt like, when the kids were there and she was there, she should be tending to the kids. So she did a contract. If you do this for this many times, you get this benefit. So set it up, like let your kids and your husband or whoever is around you know how important this is to you. Because if it's not important to you, they're going to take it from you.
Now, you brought up some really important points about support, because when we're wanting to use natural healing to become healthier, a lot of times we need support from our family and friends, even if it's just like you said, hey, I need 30 minutes to meditate, or I need to take an hour to go for a walk or to go to the gym or go swimming. So what are some of the best ways that you can think of to generate this support and get the support that we need from our family and loved ones to make the changes?
First of all, I think you have to recognize that you deserve it. It goes back to that deserving. Sometimes people feel bad about taking away family time or time that they should, and I emphasize the should, be doing something else. So first of all, and first and foremost, is really getting yourself on board with yourself. And once you do that, I think it becomes a lot easier to ask for help, whether it's, and also in asking for help, make it be an exchange. It's like if you've got a family of 5, work with your husband or work with your wife or partner to say, I need this. How can I support you? When do you want to do this? Where will it work for you? And with the kids saying, this is my time. We're going to be together during this time, so that they know and they're on board that they're not losing you. And number one thing that I think is really important is you are teaching your kids that these are important things to live a good life. I mean, the only way they find that out is from you. And so by doing that and setting that example and saying, it's important to work out, honey, it's important to meditate, it's important to take time for yourself, and don't make any apologies for it, but be really direct in saying, I'm doing this because it's important for you too.
Now, you mentioned that you had a daughter, and I was just reading an article today about the increased risk of suicides and self-harm among young people. And, you and I are both adults. We've learned many, many ways to handle stress and to be at our best as much as possible. How can we help young people who've not developed the skill sets to cope with the changes of life? What are some of the things that we can do as parents, as society, and people who want to support the young people who don't have these skill sets?
Empower them. Everybody's got something that they can do. And if you emphasize what they're good at, even if it's like sometimes I'll find myself saying to my daughter, I really like the way you wrote that paper. Or I really appreciate how you did the dishes. You did a great job. Or I really appreciate whatever it is, even though it's may seem small and insignificant, you are building confidence in that child. And when they ask you for something or when they tell you they're struggling, believe them. You know what? We have a tendency to want to minimize what's going on with our kids because it's a hassle to stop and deal with it, or we don't have time to deal with their stuff too. But when they are coming to you, when they are taking that risk to tell you, I got a problem, or this is bothering me, or this is going on, listen. You know, one of my good friends was telling a story about how when her son was really small, he would tug on her and, you know, she would be busy making dinner and doing stuff. And then finally he looked at her and said, "Mommy, you're not listening to my words."
Oh.
And I think that was really powerful. And I never forgot that because I got to witness that and recognize, wow, kids are really trying to get our attention all the time. And if we empower them and listen to what they have to say and talk to them, you know, in whatever age level is appropriate. I mean, the way I talk to my 15-year-old is very different than the way you talk to a 5-year-old. But the earlier that we can start empowering them, the earlier that we can get them feeling good about themselves, the least likely they are to commit suicide or to do drugs or to do any of those things that are really destructive behaviors.
And you brought up something very important that you do with your daughter, and that is listening. I have to say, this morning I was working with a young woman. I believe she's just 12 years old, and she's had a lot of trouble making friends. I analyzed her brain profile, and I explained it to her and her mother and explained what was going on. And then I asked guidance about what she needed to be at her best self and to cope with the stress. And the number one thing that she needed was actually to be listened to, not necessarily to have any problems fixed, but just to be able to talk and to have someone listen. So,
absolutely.
So how do you listen to your daughter? Because I know you have a very close relationship with your daughter and you're very conscious about how you mentor her.
Yes, I am. And my wish is that every parent would do the same. How do I do it? Eye contact, you know, putting down whatever you're doing. And, you know, it's tricky because sometimes you have to keep on doing what you're doing so they'll keep talking. So, for example, if we're driving in the car, and if you're a parent, you know the car is the best place because they're trapped. And when they talk to you, obviously you got to keep driving, but keeping it light, keeping it eye contact when you can, putting down what you're doing when they're talking to you, and so that they know that what they're saying is important, that you don't have a million other things going on, that you're there for them in that moment. I mean, oftentimes it is only a moment. And what I'm beginning to realize as my daughter is getting older now is those moments are few and far between, because pretty soon she'll be off to college. So, you know, at this stage of the game, I cherish them even more because pretty soon she'll be gone.
Now, Pat, I know that you work with people of all ages. When you listen to yourself in your practice, what are the most common pieces of advice that you find yourself giving over and over again to your clients?
Oh, you know, having said earlier about empowering people to be their highest and best, sometimes it's just a matter of listening to them and repeating back to them what they've said, or putting a spin on it so they hear it a little differently. And also, I guess the other thing that really helps is if there's a certain situation that somebody's dealing with, if I give them my take on that situation, I will say something like, you may want to consider, as an invitation. So I think it's really important to invite people to look at it different instead of telling them what you think, because that's just my viewpoint. But if I offer a suggestion to say, you may want to consider X, Y, or Z, then it opens a dialogue for them to begin to discover themselves what the solution is to the problem.
Now, what do you think people need to give themselves permission to be happy? Because you talked about how, we have so many people have issues with not feeling good enough, and when they don't feel good enough, then they don't feel like they deserve. So what do you think people need so that they can give themselves permission to be happy and to take the steps to feel happy?
I think they really need to understand on a very core level that happiness is a birthright. It's not something you have to get good enough to have. It's not about what you do. It's not about how much you earn. It is already there. It's your birthright. Joy is a birthright. It is not earned. And so it varies on how to get people to understand that based on who they are and how old they are and how entrenched they are in staying unhappy. But really getting them to understand that it's already there for the taking.
Now, as you know, most of us have a set point. We have lots of set points. Set points, for example, in what you weigh, what your body weight is. Set points in how much money you earn. And definitely set points in how happy you allow yourself to feel. What do you think people can do to reset their set point so they can experience higher levels of happiness other than just what they're used to or what they're giving themselves permission to experience?
I think those set points generally come from belief systems, and those belief systems come very early in our life. I worked with a client before I came on vacation this week who believed that she had the body type of her family, and her family was all kind of big people, and so her belief was that she really didn't have any choice. She had that body. So we worked with getting her to understand that that was just a belief that she had accepted, and looked at where it came from. And when I saw her before I came down here, as of that day, she had probably lost about 35, 40 pounds effortlessly. Just really doing the same thing. I mean, your cells in your body are compliant. They will do what you tell them to do. They don't have a thought process. So if your brain function says we are fat people, your cells go, okay, we do fat. It's as simple as that. So changing those set points is really finding out where that belief comes from, what the belief is, and creating a new one so that your cells are hearing a different story.
That is so true. Now, Pat, how much do you think our happiness level affects our physical health?
1,000%. I mean, if you are somebody who is depressed all the time, angry all the time, you carry all of that tension in your body. I mean, look at how much we know about how stress affects our health. Every day another study comes out about how important it is to get control of your stress and to do meditation and do things like that, because it increases your likelihood of high blood pressure, cancer, and go right on down the line. So how important is it? Critical.
Now, you mentioned that you take time every week in order to write. What are you writing next? What's your next writing project?
Well, I'm doing a couple things right now. I can't do just one thing at a time. I'm writing my next book, and I'm working. I have another company called Comprehensive Wellness for Life where I work with clients individually. And so I've done a lot of writing specifically for that. I write a newsletter every month, and if you want to come to my website and sign up for that, you'll get that. So it just depends on whatever's pushing me at that moment. I'm also working on an online course, so sometimes I'm doing the text for that. So I got a bunch of things that I'm working on at once.
And can you give everyone your website so that people can sign up for your newsletter?
Sure. www.comprehensivewellnessforlife.com and gibsonchiropracticclinic.com. Both of those will get you to the same place.
Now, I know that in your practice, you use a lot of natural healing remedies, including supplements. how important do you think supplementation is for the average person in Western society?
When I was first in practice, I didn't think it was that important. I've been in practice 35 years. And in that period of time, a lot of things have changed. Right now, our soil is really depleted of its minerals. Our food gets radiated. Finding organic food for a lot of people is really, really difficult. And so I think supplementation is really important, whether it's a overall multivitamin, definitely an omega-3. We have far too many omega-6s in our diet. And I think that's an important thing I'll talk about in just a minute. But before I talk about that, I want to talk about the kind of supplements that people take, because there's a big misunderstanding about this. Because people will come to me and they'll say, hey, I read this article about vitamin E causing strokes in men. And what do you think about that? And I say, it's true. And it's true if you are taking a synthetic vitamin. There is a vast difference between a synthetic vitamin that's made in a lab and a whole food vitamin that comes from food. And the thing is, the whole food vitamins don't cost anymore. It's just education. And for example, if you take vitamin C that is synthetic, it is sulfuric acid and corn syrup. That's what makes vitamin C.
Ugh.
When you take a whole food vitamin that's made from whole foods, and I'm not talking about whole foods at the grocery store, I'm talking about real foods. When you take a vitamin C that is made from whole foods, it has all of the natural bioflavonoids and all of the things that you cannot get by making acid and corn syrup. It's just dead. It's living versus dead. So it's very important when you're supplementing that you take the right kinds of supplements. I tell my patients all the time, do you ever look at the side of the bottle where it says 2,343% of your recommended daily allowance? They have to put that much in there so that you can get the little bit out of it that you need. And a lot of people don't really recognize that. I mentioned omega-3s. Right now, Alzheimer's is on a rapid escalation. The number of people that are getting Alzheimer's daily is astronomical. And part of what we're knowing about that is that it's because of inflammation in our body. Omega-3s create an anti-inflammatory effect, and the omega-6s create an inflammatory effect. Now, a certain amount of inflammation is necessary for growth and repair, but the problem is where we're getting it from. Omega-6s come from any farm-fed, and I emphasize the farm-fed, fish, fowl, beef, any processed food, basically a lot of the stuff we eat. And unfortunately, the omega-3s only come from the wild, emphasizing again wild, salmon, tuna, sardines, certain eggs, walnut oil, herring, avocado. So you see it's a really small amount of things that have omega-3 to bring down that inflammation, and a whole lot of omega-6s which bring up that inflammation. And inflammation is linked to diseases, and the problem is it's not just inflaming our knees and our ankles and our muscles, it's also inflaming our brain, which is part of the reason that we're seeing such an increase in this Alzheimer's, among other things.
Yeah. So we're going to all run out right now after this program is over and take our omega.
That brings up a great point. When this information came to light, there was a lot of bad omega-3 products put on the market. They're not filtered. They have mercury in them. Many of them are rancid. And people will say to me, how do I know if it's bad? I say, put it in the freezer. If it freezes overnight, see, most of the omega-3, what it is the antifreeze in the cold water fish. That's why you can only get it from cold water fish. So if that omega-3 that you put in the freezer freezes, it's bad. It should not freeze.
That is really great information. So everybody in the audience, if you have omega-3s on your supplement shelf, put it in the freezer. If it freezes, Dr. Pat says it's bad and you should throw it away. And being a kinesiologist, I muscle tested lots of the inexpensive fish oils. I found one from a well-known company that had arsenic in it.
It's amazing when you really start looking at some of these products, and that's the problem, is that's why vitamins have such a bad rap these days, is because there's not a lot of regulation. There are great products out there. I know we can't say what they are, but if you want to email me personally, I will let you know what they are. But let's just say you can't get a million of them for $2, and they're probably not going to be good.
Yeah, that's right. If it's super cheap, it's probably not good. Absolutely. Yeah.
It also doesn't have to be super expensive. Okay, it's not the extremes. It's definitely not really expensive. It's just knowing what you're buying, because there's a lot of really bad products that cost a whole lot of money. Okay, yeah. So it's not really the cost per se. But yes, if you're getting 1,000 of them for $3, probably not the best kind.
Yes, and as you and I would both agree, everyone is biochemically unique. So even if you need omega-3s or vitamin C or what have you, how much I need and how much Dr. Pat needs and how much you need could be totally different. And
yeah, absolutely.
Now, Dr. Pat, will you please share your websites again with everyone?
Sure. www.gibsonchiropracticclinic.com or www.comprehensive wellness for life. And the Comprehensive Wellness for Life is where I work individually with people. I've had so many requests over the years. People would say, can I just come in and talk to you for an hour? And I'd be like, no, I don't do that. So, a friend challenged me one day and said, why don't you do that? I mean, people are asking you for it. And so I devised a couple programs where I work with people, whether it's a month, a week, or for like people who are out of town, I usually would do a VIP day where I go spend the entire day with them. I just came back from Arizona where I did someone out there 2 weeks ago. So there's lots of ways to work with me.
You've been listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. This is Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at CatherineCarrigan.com and UnlimitedEnergyNow.com. While you're there, sign up for my newsletters and find out even more about how to be healthy naturally without drugs or surgery. Thanks so much for listening. This is Catherine Carrigan. See you next time.